In this video, we're going to look at some of the fundamental techniques for working with charts. In this example, Rohan would like to create a column chart to show the CO2 emissions by different fuel types. He has prepared the data by showing snapshots every 10 years from 1937 to the present. The first thing you need to do is to select the data you want to be included in your chart. And it's also very important that you include the labels. So we're going to select from here all the way across to Other, and not include our totals. We're then going to come to our Insert tab in our ribbon. And in the middle of the Insert tab is our Charts group, from which you can choose a great selection of charts. If you have the Recommended Charts option, which is available in the newer versions of Excel, that's really worth having a look at, as it will often give you the chart type that you want. If you're working with an older version of Excel, however, you may not have it. So we're going to do it the manual way. Now, to create a column chart, you come to the column chart icon, click the drop down, and then choose the column or bar chart you want. In this case, a 2D clustered column. There is, however, a keyboard shortcut that you can use as well, and that is Alt F1. And that gives you a clustered column, which is great, where there is a cluster of columns for each row. Now, probably the first thing you want to do is move and resize your chart. When moving, do be careful not to select a piece of the chart, because then you'll just move that piece, in which case immediately undo. So stay near the edges of the chart, and then just click and drag. To resize, you can use any of the resize handles, and you just click and drag away from the middle to make it bigger, or towards the middle to make it smaller. And there's our chart. But there is one immediate problem. Our years have not appeared on our x-axis. If you look closely, they've actually appeared as a series, and that's because they are numbers. And as far as Excel is concerned, if it sees a number, it tries to chart it. So one of the first things we're going to do is have to address this issue. Now we need to remove year as a series, and there's a really quick way that you can do that. You'll notice all the data is surrounded by a blue box. If I come to the corner and click and drag, I can actually change what data is included. So I've removed it as a series, but now I need to add it as labels. Now with your chart selected, you will notice you have two new ribbons. The names vary across different versions of Excel. In this version, it's called Chart Design. In older versions, you may see Chart Tools Design. Either way, please click on this ribbon and then come to Select Data. The Select Data dialog allows you to manage exactly what data is or isn't included in your chart. So you could see I could go and add and remove series over here. But more importantly, we can change our horizontal axis labels. So I'm going to click Edit, and then you literally just select the labels you want to see included, and it's fixed it already. So I'm just going to say OK and OK. Now it's quite possible that having created your chart, you look at it and decide that a different chart type might be better. And certainly with this many datasets, this graphic is looking a little bit busy. So let's have a look at another alternative. We're going to come up to our Chart Design ribbon, and we're going to click Change Chart Type, and we can swap this for any chart type that will support this type of data. And a stacked column in this case may be a better option. Do be careful, there's also a 100% stack column, and that shows the stack out of 100%, and that's not what we want. So make sure you've got a stacked column and then say OK. And what this has done is taken all of your little clustered columns and piled them on top of each other, so you can still see the breakdown, but you can also more easily compare the total emissions for each year represented. Now let's talk about making our chart look a little bit nicer. To begin with, on your Chart Design tab, you'll see a gallery of styles. And as you hover over these different styles, it gives you a preview. And if you want even more options, you can click the drop down and you'll see even more options in there. So these are really good quick options, but we're going to do them manually so you can see all the alternatives. So first of all, my legend, it looks fine, but I'd like to change the position. So I'm going to come to this little green plus to the right of my chart, and this shows me all the different components. And from here, I can switch them off altogether, which I don't want to switch my legend off, so I'm going to turn it back on. And if I click the little black arrow to the right of it, you'll see I can change the position. And if I were to move it to the left, for example, you'll see it adjust the whole chart accordingly. But I'd like to see it at the top. Now I should probably also change my chart title. Your chart title would normally show by default, but again, if it doesn't, you can always just turn it on in the Chart Elements dialog. So clicking into my chart title, I'm actually going to need to replace this text. If you highlight and press delete, you may delete your title by mistake. So I suggest rather press Ctrl A to select everything and just overtype. So I'm just going to type in emissions by fuel, and then you can just click away. Another thing I'd like to address is my vertical axis. Because the numbers are so large, these numbers are actually quite hard to understand. So I'm going to click on my vertical axis, and if you want even more options than available from the plus, you can either right-click Format or just double-click. And that will open up a panel on the right, and this gives you the full range of options for changing the components within your chart. Now first of all, please select the axis options, which is the little bar icon. And then we go to open up axis options, and the one we want to change is the display units. And these are such big numbers that I'm actually going to set it to billions. Not only is it much more readable now, but it's also put in a label for me. That was just one of many options. I encourage you to explore and see what else you can do in here. Let's make one final aesthetic tweak. I would like to make each of these bars a little wider. So I'm going to select one series, doesn't matter which, and that switches the gray panel over to show me the formatting options for my data series. And the gap width between these columns is really wide. So I'm going to change it to 50%, which reduces the gap width and thus increases the width of each column. And I think that looks much nicer now. One more thing Rohan wants to do, he'd like to include his percentage increase in this chart. Now previously we saw how we could just adjust this area, but that only works with data that's right next to each other. Obviously this is not sitting with that data. We can come to select data and add it from there. But there's quite a neat trick which is not as obvious, which I'd like to show you. So we're actually going to select the data from H3, including the heading, and write down to 16%. And I'm going to copy Ctrl+C, and then I'm just going to click on the edge of the chart so it's selected, and I'm going to paste Ctrl+V. And that has actually added my percentage increase, but I can't see it. And the reason for that is, these numbers are going up in billions, whereas my percentage increases are all less than 1. So the values are so tiny that I can't actually see them. In order to compare data of different units, what you need to do is to put in a second axis. And the easiest way to do that is to come to Chart Design. Come to Change Chart Type, and right at the bottom choose Combo. Now it switched everything to clustered column for a moment. Don't worry about that. We're just going to scroll down, and we actually like our other to go back to being a stacked column. And you'll see when you do that, it switches everything else back to stacked. We do want our percentage increase to be a line, but the important thing is we want that to be on a secondary axis. So I'm going to tick and say OK. And now it has created a secondary axis showing our percentages, and we can see our percentage increase along with our billion tons of emissions. So there's our finished chart, which is now looking very great.